Module 7, Supporting Quality Curriculum and Evaluating Center Components. First, we're going to discuss the definition of curriculum. A curriculum is usually defined as a well-informed understanding of what teachers define as children's interests, developmental skill expectations, and early learning content. It's the incorporation of developmentally appropriate methods that support learning and development. It's also the utilization of effective assessment strategies that inform instruction, document child progress, and provide data for continuous program improvement. There's also careful stages of the development of the environment that you must consider. This would be in the classroom, in the building, and on the playground. You also have to consider thoughtful selection of authentic materials, which are real objects that make learning meaningful, and also the implementation of professional development that enhances the teacher's ability to work with children and families that helps you to construct this high-quality curriculum. Opportunities for curriculum mentoring that support critical reflection, quality curriculum, and intentional teaching. So when we talk about intentional teaching, it's teaching to teach certain standards and teach certain concepts. It's very thoughtful teaching that is directed by certain content or certain topic areas. By now you have heard the term quite often, developmentally appropriate curriculum. So a DAP curriculum would include, it's comprehensive, children are active and engaged, the goals are clear and shared by all, the curriculum is evidence-based, so there's research to back it up. It's valued, and the content is learned through investigation. So it's very play-oriented and focused on this intentional teaching concept. Curriculum builds on prior learning and experience. Professional standards also validate the curriculum. So this would be your early learning and development standards. And then curriculum is likely to benefit all children. And we also have to factor in culturally appropriate curriculum. Next, we'll discuss assessment tools. So some of the common assessment tools used to assess the environment would be the ECHRS. This is an environmental rating scale for early childhood. The EIDRS, which is an infant-toddler rating scale, and the CLASS, which you may have heard of in a Head Start classroom. This is Classroom Assessment Scoring System. So these types of assessment are used to evaluate classroom environments and interactions that go on either in an early childhood or an infant-toddler setting. So when we talk about different styles of curriculum, there are two main areas that are usually categorized under style. So the first one is child-centered. The second one is adult-centered. So a child-centered curriculum would be, an example might be an emergent curriculum where you're following the leads of the children. And for example, if you have planned to talk about dinosaurs that day and there's a butterfly outside and the children are interested in butterfly, you may switch gears and switch topics to talk about bugs or talk about plants or talk about something that follows the children's interest. An adult-centered curriculum tends to be more adult and teacher-driven. So these are more structured types of curriculum that are guided by more adult interest, and also it can be guided by standards that adults want the children to meet or the objectives of their curriculum or their particular lesson. So next we're going to talk about web-based curriculum planning and STEM. So a web-based curriculum planning process would include you identify a theme and then you come up with related subtopics. So for example, you might have a theme of bugs that you would put in the center here, your center circle. And then you would come up with different related subtopics. So under bugs you might include types of bugs, ladybugs, grasshoppers. You might include what they eat, where they live, their environment. So you're basically brainstorming different areas that you can focus your teaching and activities on. You're also going to make sure you identify desired learning outcomes, and then you prepare to teach those concepts. Moving on to STEM. STEM is getting a lot more attention than it used to. There's a little bit of a shift that we as professionals in the field of education are teaching children concepts that they're not getting at an early age. We teach it later on, but we don't really focus in preschool. So STEM is being taught at younger ages. So STEM basically focuses on science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, those might sound like scientific or very formal terms, but we can teach some of these concepts, such as science concepts. We can do through water, through science experiments. Engineering, we can do pulleys, we can do simple things. So we can really teach these concepts in the most basic form with our preschool children. Facilitation of language development and emergent literacy. So first we're going to talk about alphabet knowledge. This refers to the names and the sounds associated with printed letters. Next is phonological awareness, and this refers to the ability to detect, manipulate, or analyze auditory aspects of the spoken language. This might be segment words, syllables, or phonemes, independent of the meaning. So the rapid automatic naming of letters or digits, also known as RAM. This is the ability to rapidly name a sequence of random letters or digits. Next, we're going to talk about random objects and colors. So the same idea, but you are naming a sequence of repeating sets of pictures or objects. Writing or writing the name. This is the ability to write letters in isolation, on request, or to write one's own name. And then lastly, phonological memory is the ability to remember spoken information for a very short period of time. So when we talk about technology in the classroom, when we talk about infants and toddlers and preschool and kindergarten. For infants and toddlers, we need to allow children to explore digital materials in the context of human interactions. This is so important. We never want to just hand a child an iPad or hand a child an electronic gadget. We want to make sure it's an interactive process. Avoid passive screen time. This is something that's getting a lot more attention, especially in the home. Some research says that children at the infant toddler age should have no screen time. So this will be dependent on what the family's personal beliefs are. Provide children with toy representations of digital objects to encourage toddlers to begin to pretend play. So maybe handing them a block and talking about, is this a camera? Is this a cell phone? So encouraging their imagination. We move on to preschool and kindergarten. We're allowing them to explore touch screens and a wide variety of developmentally appropriate interactive media experiences. So again, I want to stress that it's developmentally appropriate. We begin to allow exploration and having them use traditional a mouse, a keyboard, and using some of the simple interactive tools that are included in media. Unfortunately, our schools are now very much driven by much more technology. So children are now taking tests, high stakes tests in school, so they do need to be familiar with what a mouse is, what a keyboard is, and how to use those materials when going to school later on. Capture photos of block buildings or artwork that the children have created, so even using a camera or a digital camera is helpful. So discussion questions I want you to think about as we go through this module. Why is the addition of content standards making choosing appropriate curriculum more difficult? And then how can a director promote both child-centered practices and maintain control over the curriculum? Moving on to indicators of effective assessment. So when we talk about assessment, there are ethical principles that guide the assessment practices. Assessments are typically used to document knowledge, to document understanding. Assessment instruments are in compliance with professional criteria for quality. We also need to factor in the cultural aspects of assessment, because many times assessment are geared towards one dominant type of culture, so then children that come from a variety of cultures may not do as well on these assessments. The best assessments are going to use multiple sources to gather over time. So a one-shot deal assessment is not going to be as effective over gathering more effective, smaller snapshots of data. These are called formative assessments. And then using individually administered norm reference tests should be limited. So we are not testing children. We are gathering information to to learn what their progress is or to learn areas that they need to some assistance in. Assessment evidence is gathered from realistic settings and situations. So making sure we're assessing them in their real environment and not putting them in an artificial environment. Next, we'll talk about evaluating the center components. So the purpose of evaluating the center components is to measure the center's program and services, to determine the staff's effectiveness, assess children's progress, and then determine goals that are for the center, and then to look at the efficiency of time, cost, and energy, and then to also help you plan for the future. So a staff evaluation should be an ongoing evaluation that begins when staff members are hired. The goals for the center and individual classrooms should be shared. So staff should be made aware of this evaluation process, and it should not be a surprise or a last-minute type of assessment. The director's role, when we talk about this type of assessment, is to observe and analyze the work of the staff person over time, not just a one-shot deal again. You're going to encourage the development of that person's strengths and discourage weaknesses. So evaluate areas that that person may need some assistance or mentoring with. You're going to promote growth rather than provide on-the-job training. Observations and videotaping are helpful, and you're going to develop a teacher improvement plan or a plan that the staff can use to work on their skills in the areas that are identified by the director. Child evaluation and assessment. Basically, an assessment is the process of gathering information about children in order to make educational decisions. An evaluation is a process of making judgments about the merits, value, or worth of educational programs or materials. So you can see there's a big difference between evaluation and assessment. Child assessment methods and ethics. So we have assessment methods and ethics we're going to talk about. So child assessment methods, some appropriate materials of assessing children might be, well, it always will include developmentally appropriate methods, but we're also going to include the cultural and linguistic responsiveness of these methods. So we're recognizing that not every culture is going to have the same strengths or the same skills as another one might. The connection of the methods to the daily activities, supporting of the methods by professional development, and making sure we always include families. Child assessment ethics might include we shall do no harm to children and its most important principle. So this is a principle stated by the NAEYC that talks about the need to make sure we don't stress children out or use assessments in a negative fashion. We will not put children in stressful situations, and the goal of assessment is just to gather data to help the child reach their potential. The results help in enabling families, teachers, and other professionals to plan for the child's continued growth. And finally, assessment tools. There are a variety of assessment tools that we can use in the classroom. Running records, where you're writing everything down you see. You're not analyzing, but you're just writing information. Anecdotal records are when you're interpreting that information. Teacher notes, this can be informal ways of just jotting down information. Checklists are a great way to collect data quickly and to look for certain behaviors. Rating scales, you're listing behaviors that you're looking for in particular, which helps you to identify these quickly so you can gather data on a larger group. Portfolios tend to be more centered around the thought that we're collecting data, we're collecting work samples, we're collecting information over a long period of time about a child to get the whole picture. And then finally, standardized tests. These should never drive a curriculum. These can be used very minimally, especially as children reach kindergarten, but these should never drive our curriculum goals.